Hi, my name is Erin. I am from New York in the Hudson Valley. I have a medical billing company that I've been working in for 14 years. I've got a wonderful husband, two adult children, my twins, and I like making miniature things. I like to bike ride, and I'm going to go back to the gym and get myself buff and in shape. My official diagnosis is a high-grade serous carcinoma. It seemed like every 6 months, I was having an irregular period. So the period would be about 2 weeks in length. Um, so that was odd, but I thought maybe I was going through perimenopause. So I just kind of chalked it up to that. Um, I started feeling like cramping after orgasm. I noticed that that was pretty consistent. And I said, well, geez, there's probably something going on here, but I don't know. A previous doctor had said that I had adenomyosis of the uterus, and that was years ago. And I said I kind of just chalked it up to being some, kind of abnormality in that regard. Um, I was started drinking a lot of coffee about a year and a half before my diagnosis. I didn't really recognize it as fatigue, but I was trying to overcompensate for the fatigue. So I was doing 5, 6 cups of coffee a day. And then, of course, I'm getting dehydrated on top of that. It was a pretty big mess. Um, those were some of the initial symptoms. But I mean, any of that could have been chalked up to, I've got gastro intestinal issues. That's always been a problem, chronic constipation, bloating, issues with absorption. So um, I didn't recognize any of those to be related to what eventually became my diagnosis. So the red flag um, symptom that I started having was I started bleeding November 30th of 2020, and it did not stop. I went to a couple of different doctors. First one, I wasn't really happy with the initial diagnosis, so I went to another. They did testing for everything really, CA-125, the CEA. They were looking for any cancer markers. Everything was negative. I had the scope of the uterus, and they took some biopsies there. That all came back okay. And so it was just assumed that I had some, benign issue. And I was given the option for an IUD or a hysterectomy. And, that was in February or March. And I kicked that around for a while and didn't really make a decision until it got to August. And I'm like, I'm starting to feel pretty bad at this point. I said, I think I better make a decision. And I chose a hysterectomy. And that's when everything was revealed about 10 days after the hysterectomy. Initially, the surgery went fine. I think the biggest issue was it was about 7 days after the surgery. I started noticing like real symptoms almost immediately where it was complete constipation. I could not go at all. I couldn't eat. I was starting to feel like I was full all of the time. And then it was about 7 days in where I had incredible left side flank pain, and that was brutal. I took a couple, Tylenol or whatnot, and it seemed to ease by the next day. But I think it was about day 10, and all of a sudden I'm having urine flow out of my vagina. And I said, well, this is a problem. So I got ambulated to the hospital and to find out that I had a fistula between the vaginal cuff and the left ureter. And that is where I got my diagnosis of ovarian cancer, was in there for that complication. So it was pretty brutal and horrific to be sitting there with that kind of complication and then be told that. I went into a total state of denial. I didn't believe that I actually had it because I already had something I was trying to deal with. When I was getting adhesions, for after everything, I had abdominal adhesions. So this was just another adhesion that had developed and caused this problem. But I did not expect to hear that I had cancer that day. That's for sure. I had an argument with the doctor that was assigned to me. she wanted me to have chemo first. And I had done a bunch of research, and, some of the big guns at Sloan Kettering, Columbia, they're all saying your best bet with high-grade serous carcinoma is to take the surgical option first, if you can do it, so you can get staging, because I had no idea what stage I was. It was like, I'm flying blind here. I got nothing. So I said to her, I'm like, listen, I'm in reasonably good health. I mean, I was originally 121 pounds. I was down to 92 by the time they did the surgery. But I said, I'm still in reasonably decent health. Let's do a surgery first so I can get, a staging here, and we know what we're looking at. She took my suggestion, and we decided on surgery first. So I did the debulking surgery on November 3rd, I believe it was, of 2021. So that went okay, actually. It was more than optimal. It ended up that the disease, she said that I had extensive disease. I absolutely did. It was all through the omentum. It was through the peritoneal cavity. I mean, I had a stage of 3C once I left there. It was pretty much everywhere. But as she described, my doctor described, that it was dotted mostly throughout the abdomen. And the only place where it was really caked was the appendix and the omentum. And they found some on the mesentery of the small bowel. So I had a lot removed. The appendix and part of that section of small bowel right there where the appendix is. The small bowel mesentery was removed. The bladder peritoneum, the omentum. It was a lot. I can't even remember everything that they took, but ovaries, they took that. The ovaries were left from the hysterectomy because they thought my condition was benign. So, but the tubes were gone, the ovary was gone, my uterus was gone. I mean, everything's gone. It was pretty traumatic. I did have genetic testing towards the beginning, and when I sat down for the results, I said, am I positive on anything? And he said no. The tester said, no, you're not positive for any markers. They did test the cancer. The cancer itself was BRCA1. And so we said, you just won the bad luck lottery with regards to cancer. They ordered 6 rounds of chemo, so it was every 3 weeks, I believe. My first round, I had a reaction to one of the drugs, and I bottomed out, and the nurses were great. She was sitting with me the entire time, just watching me, and she just said she watched me go whoop, right over. And they came rushing in and propped me back up, and that was the only reaction I had ever had. After that, each one of the rounds was pretty standard, and most of them I did on the every 3 week schedule. I only had one time in February of 2022 where I was still living like I had before cancer, and I probably had too much coffee that day, and I certainly didn't have enough water, and I dehydrated myself. And let me tell you, the menopausal side effects, when you lose your ovaries, and the hot flashes, they were coming like 20 times a day, and I got a hot flash, and that was it. And I went down and had to be ambulated to the hospital, and I was severely dehydrated. So they gave me like a week, I think, in between that one. Gave me a little break. And most of them were right on schedule, and I tolerated them pretty well. And so I finished in, I believe it was the end of March of 2022 when I finished the 6 rounds. I did have a small amount of, the neuropathy. That was fairly minimal. I think that the biggest side effect of that was just hot flashes. I think the chemotherapy really accentuated those, and I was having them anyway because of the menopause.
All right, so go ahead. Go ahead.
They normally had the bell there, and the nurse says, she goes, oh no, I took the bell home to, work on it, or they were doing something to fix it. And I was like, oh, I'm like, I really wanted to ring the bell. And I said, hey, wait a minute. You guys got those like bells, like you go to ring for service or anything like that? And Yes, give me that. I'm going to ring that right now. So I run over and start bing, bing, bing on it. And that was fantastic. And I I think I really knew in the back of my mind. I said, okay, I know the statistics with this. You read the horror stories. The percentage that comes back for this particular type of ovarian cancer. It's panic inducing. But I think I knew at that point that I was going to do okay, regardless of all the mess that I didn't do physically for myself, what I caused myself. Um, and I had had a dream during treatment, and I think it was just after the fourth round. And that dream itself gave me what I think was the positive resolve to know that I had beaten it. One day I would be positive, and the next day I'd be like, I just want to be done. I just want to go away. I don't want to, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be here. It was, it was terrible. And I'm sitting here trying to run a business at the same time. And, I'm trying to, support my family, while I'm going through this, and they're trying to be my support system. But it's like I'm the people pleaser. I'm trying to fix what's going on, and I'm trying to fix their distress, and instead of worrying about what mine is. And I wish I had handled that a lot differently in hindsight. Um, and I wish I had allowed people to take care of me and support me instead of being so aggressively insistent on being independent. And maybe my mental health would have improved instead of stressing and being in a difficult headspace, I guess, for 2 years afterward. Um, physically, physically, I failed. Physically, I failed miserably. I think I should have done a lot more to support my physical health. Number one, I should have quit smoking, and that was my biggest mistake. My surgical scar didn't heal as well. I now have hernias all down my incision line in the abdomen that I'm going to have to get repaired. Um, uh, I kept drinking coffee. I just recently went to, decaf, to at least kind of take that down and stay more hydrated. But it just increased that amount of caffeine I was drinking and continued to drink just dehydrated me and did not make me feel good in general. Um, and it contributed to a bunch of, now gastrointestinal disease that I now have, particularly diverticulosis that's extensive. And I'm going to have a partial colectomy to improve, all because I had been so dehydrated the entire time. So I didn't exercise. I don't think I walked enough or took care of uh, myself physically at all. So I failed big time in that regard. I made a lot of mistakes, and I think that uh, sharing those mistakes um, can maybe give somebody else that's going through something similar and maybe a smoker, maybe a big coffee drinker, may have those vices and rely on them heavily, but that maybe with telling them how bad that was in hindsight for me to not have quit, that it will encourage them to quit and get a better outcome than I had. I'm still smoking and I'm trying to quit. I'm down from just like a pack a day. I'm down to a half a pack a day. I am trying to slowly wean myself off of it. And it's it's probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I am psychologically tied to that damn cigarette, and but I don't have a choice because I need to get surgery for the hernias and the colectomy done, and they will not do it without me quitting. I think that the only way I knew to have a voice was to do research and do reasonable research. So I was looking at only peer-reviewed journals, statistics and studies. So I was looking at JAMA, I was looking at NIH, Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, John Hopkins. I wanted to know what the experts only had to say, because there's a lot of misinformation that you can come across. It can send you into a panic. I also wanted to be respected by the doctors that were treating me, and I wanted to be able to quote from peer-reviewed studies that they would also be able to look up and confirm as well. And I think it made a huge difference in the level of care that I received and the level of respect that I got from especially my surgeon, who I will sing her praises forever. She heard me. She understood what I was up against. She did not sugarcoat anything. But when I said I wanted surgery first, and she and I duked it out, we both agreed to go ahead and do that. And I think that's rare. And I will forever appreciate her for saving my life. Don't give up at all. Do not give up. I mean, I was stage 3C. I wasn't even 4 yet, but I was close. And I at one point had considered this was before I had even been close to being diagnosed. I mean, this was probably about 3 years before my diagnosis. And something told me, there's something wrong with you. And I kept going away from cancer because that's what reasonable people do. You don't want to believe you have that. But I knew something was wrong. And I should have persisted earlier, with doctors. But don't give up. And don't assume that there's nothing wrong. Keep fighting to find out what's wrong with you. And don't take the first, doctor's explanation necessarily. Because the first one I got was ridiculous. It's not even a diagnosis in the ICD-10. So never give up and fight for yourself and your life, because living is way better than being dead. Way better.